welcome to Lil's Vintage World. This video is going to be about two books that were recently released from Pen and Sword, and Pen and Sword very kindly sent me these books. I did request them because they just sounded right up my street, because these are both books on women's suffrage, and I'm sure you know by now one of my great interests in history is the women's suffrage movement. I'm actually currently writing my dissertation for my master's degree in history, and guess what that's on? It's on the women's suffrage movement. So yes, any books that come out about the women's suffrage movement, I am all over them like a rash, and I'm so glad that there's so many more coming out, and these are two recent releases that I really rather enjoyed and wanted to talk to you about them. So the first is The Rebel Suffragette, The Life of Edith Rigby by Beverley Adams. As you can see, I kind of did a few tabs here and there of this book because I did rather enjoy it, and I thought there were some really interesting parts of this as well. This first tab is 14 Reasons for Supporting Women's Suffrage. There's also a couple of lines here that I really liked and thought were particularly well written, and I just, sometimes when you're just like, oh, I just really like how that was written, then I just go ahead and tab it. Anyway, this book is what it says on the tin. This is a biography of Edith Rigby. Now, if you read books on the women's suffrage movement, in particular the suffragettes, so those that were militant, those that were committing criminal acts of violence and risking going to prison and everything that then comes alongside that, you will come across the name Edith Rigby. However, there hasn't been that much done about just her. She's always in the background. She's always, you know, in a paragraph, in a sentence of some sort of militant action that was taking place, and her name comes across. But she completely deserves to have a full biography of her own, so I'm so glad that Beverley Adams has written it. And this was really good. It looks at primary source evidence from Edith herself, but also from Edith's niece as well. I presume Beverley went to visit her and spoke to her and, you know, got this wonderful information about her aunt, because Edith Rigby was a member of the WSPU. She was actually secretary of one of the branches, and she was very prominent in the North in particular, like so many suffragettes are. It started in the North, of course it started in Manchester, the suffragettes, the Women's Social Political Union with Emmeline Pankhurst, that started in Manchester. So she's very prominent in the North, but then she does move to London as well, and does stuff in London, as lots of suffragettes were, because that's where Parliament is. That's where, you know, they're going to get heard, if they get heard. And it's really interesting to hear a bit about her background and to hear more of the involvement that she got into, you know, rather than just, this is what she did, this is the militancy that she took, this is what she did, this is the criminal action that she took place in, rather than this is her, and it's better than she's just a footnote. It's nice for her to actually have her own biography. So yes, wonderful read. And then completely the other side of the women's suffrage movement, we have this one. This is The Great Miss Lydia Becker, Suffragist, Scientist and Trailblazer by Joanna M. Williams. This is quite the beast in comparison to this one. This is so different because Lydia Becker was a suffragist. She wasn't militant, and actually she died before the WSPU, the Women's Social Political Union, the suffragettes, was even a thing. She died before that. But Miss Lydia Becker was a huge influence on the women's suffrage movement, and she did so much for the cause and so much for the movement. And again, she's one of these people that when you read about the women's suffrage movement, you read about the history of the movement, she's constantly there, but she never gets enough credit. And I'm so glad that this book is here, because wow, didn't this book deliver and then some on the primary source evidence? There is so much evidence in here that was just so wonderful, and it's so thoroughly researched. I absolutely loved this book. This book, it is a biography, but it's more about Lydia herself and how she fits into the suffrage movement rather than the suffrage movement and how you know, it fits in. It's more about her and then fitting the suffrage movement around that, because it was a huge influential part of her life. But it also talks about her love of science, in particular botany. She was a botanist. I love that word. And I'm really quite keen on plants and outdoors and gardening things. So I thought, oh, that was really an interesting part of her that I didn't really know much about. But also it's about her not just in suffrage and science, but also her involvement in just generally obtaining more rights for women. And she was a real fascinating person. As I said, there's tons of primary source evidence in here. So thoroughly well researched. I haven't read such a well researched book in such a long time. You know, when I was going into this book, you know, it says on the back, I'm sure it says on the back somewhere. It says somewhere, yes, extensive use of the unpublished papers of Lydia Becker, other suffragists and suffrage societies. And I was like, oh yeah. Wow. There's just so much of it, and it was just so wonderful to read. And actually, I spent so long reading the notes. I've never enjoyed reading notes so much before, but yeah, I did. Really useful book for me, actually. And so there we have it, 2 recent book releases on the women's suffrage movement, one on the suffragettes, one on a suffragist, and it is just wonderful to see that biographies of these amazing people are coming out into the world and being spoken of, and, you know, go and get your hands on and read it. So let me know in the comments section if any of these have taken your fancy. Have you heard about these people before? Have you heard about these books before? And what books have you read recently on the women's suffrage movement? I would love to know. So thank you very much for watching this video. Take care, and I shall see you again soon for the next one. Bye for now.